Tatiana.
Proceed with the first panel session of the conference. Its topic is Becoming a Sustainable Peace Friend. How could non-Western countries contribute to ending the Russian aggression against Ukraine? And I'm happy to invite to the stage the moderator of this panel session, and it is Olga Rudenko, chief editor of the Kyiv Independent Media Outlet. So, Olga?
Yeah, they just tried to stop me right there. I don't know why. Що? Будь ласка, ставте їх. Да. Right. So while they're sorting out the furniture issue, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for having me here. I'm going to be joined today by several amazing panelists, and wow. I've never done this way before. Anyways, so I have to admit I'm a little more worried than usual, a little more nervous than usual today, because usually when I moderate a panel or participate in one, it's usually on an issue that I understand fairly well. It's usually on something that I'm almost an expert on. But in this case, I come to the stage with a question, with a lot of questions. I do think that we in Ukraine don't understand the countries that we refer to as the Global South well enough, and it's proved to be a special challenge in the context of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Are we good to start? Можемо починати? Right, looks like we have the furniture. It's great. Okay, are we napkined enough? This is quite a process. All right. Можна починати? It is my honor to invite the panelists who will now have the chairs to sit in. Thank you. So we have a mixed panel of international and Ukrainian participants, and we have a mixed panel of people in person and joining us online. Let me invite to the stage Uria Fancelli. Uria is an international politics analyst and author. He's a political commentator for CNN, Portugal, and Brazil. Brian Oruta. Brian is a senior digital reporter for the Star newspaper in Kenya. Dr. Swasti Rao. Dr. Rao is a fellow at the Europe and Eurasia Center at Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis in India. And we are joined online, I hope we are, by Dr. Dina Prapto Raharja, Executive Director of Synergy Policies in Indonesia. Do we have Dr. Dina? Питання до нашого технічного супроводу.
And once again, the question to our technical support.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us, Dina. And we have a Ukrainian participant, Andriy Kononenko, Deputy Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. We will be joined later by another Ukrainian participant, Daria Zarivna, an advisor to the head of the presidential office. She will be arriving a little late. So let's dive in. We have a lot of ground to cover at this panel. It's truly an honor to moderate such a panel. I don't know why I'm sitting so far from you guys, but I hope you can hear me all right. Let's just put a little bit of context on when we're talking. This week, we crossed the milestone of 1,000 days of full-scale invasion. Also today, Ukraine, as was mentioned by one of the previous speakers, Ukraine marks a very special day. It's a day of dignity and freedom. It marks two revolutions that changed Ukraine: the Euromaidan revolution 11 years ago and the Orange Revolution 20 years ago. And Russia has already sent its congratulations in its preferred form of a missile attack this morning when it used, apparently for the first time, an intercontinental ballistic missile on Ukraine. So a lot was packed into this morning for us. And we have a lot to pack into this panel. I want to start with an opening question. First to our international participants, and then we'll go to Andrei, we'll be good hosts, and we'll allow our international guests to speak first. And the question, I'm gonna phrase it on purpose in a very simple way. Why are you here? And by that I mean, why do you think it's important for you as a representative of your country to be in Ukraine or to join us online as Dr. Dina does? And if you could use this as a way to make your opening statement to summarize the stance of your country on the Russian aggression against Ukraine and the recent development, if there were any changes in this perception and in this stance, and why I think it's important for your countries to support the peace process in Ukraine. I think we can start with Uria here.
First of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I don't know when I'm going to have the opportunity to talk to such a public again, so I think I'll start by reading some notes that I think will answer your question. So I decided to participate in this conference in Ukraine because I believe, of course, that the Russian invasion is not only a local tragedy, but a symptom of broader systemic issues in international relations. There is no doubt that Vladimir Putin has imperialistic ambition. I'm not putting that into question. But we have today a global crisis of trust. We live in a world that is marked by double standards that divide countries and weaken institutions that are meant to foster cooperation. Examples of this are everywhere. In Brazil, for instance, why the government promotes multiculturalism and international cooperation, the president signaled that he would host Vladimir Putin for the G20 meeting, something that after backlash happened, he decided to go back. But this reflects contradictions in a country that says that it lives under international, that it upholds these international norms. These double standards are also present in other countries, such as the United States. The country loses its credibility when, for example, it applauds the International Criminal Court for issuing an arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin, but at the same time criticizes the same court for threatening to do the same with Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. Such inconsistencies, they feed the perception of hypocrisy among countries in the Global South, which have already experienced similar scenarios. One striking example was during the COVID pandemic, when the rich countries gathered and promised vaccines to the poor countries, but most of them were already almost 1/3% of the total population was vaccinated, and the poor, the African countries, the Latin American countries, they were 0.5%. Where's the collaboration on that? Where are the promises on that? Another issue it is in the United Nations Security Council. It is an institution that is supposed to uphold the global security. But it has, as one of its members, a country that is governed by a dictator who is a war criminal. Well, and additionally, just to end, I came to Ukraine to contribute to the debate and help the country consider more effective approaches to engage with developing nations. The current rhetoric focus on colonialism does not seem to be achieving the desired results. When Ukraine rightfully denounces Russian colonialism while simultaneously expressing its legitimate desire to join NATO and the European Union, institutions that are often seen as, by many in the Global South, as are responsible for causing some of the world disorder, it sends a message that comes sometimes as contradictory. So Ukraine needs to identify other narratives that are less vulnerable to accusations of double standards. And these narratives, they exist. Despite their historical differences, Ukrainian developing nations, they share common aspirations. Everyone wants to develop, prosper, be secure and free. And I'm sure we can find common ground together.
Thank you, Uriah. Thank you for such a beautiful opening statement. Before we can go to Brian next, I just want to make a little announcement. We were just joined by our last panelist, Daria Zarivna. She's an advisor to the head of the Presidential Office of Ukraine. And in her current role, Daria takes active participation in the peace formula and peace summits. So, Daria, as I understand, you are a bit short on time, so you want to make an opening statement now. Is that correct?
Well, now I'm not short of time because I've already been late, so I feel massively guilty for that. So no, I will stay till the end of the panel, of course, so we can continue with our...
So we can go in the order. Okay.
Yeah, I can be the last one as a punishment for being late.
No, we're not going to punish you, but we can go in this order. We were saying that Andrei and I agreed that we'll be good hosts and allow our international guests to speak first. So next, Brian, the question I remind is, why are you here?
Yeah, hello, can you all hear me? Yeah, so I'm so used to being on the other side of asking questions, so this, first of all, feels so weird to me. I am here for so many reasons. First of all, I am here to understand what does Ukraine need from us, from the African region? I'm here to understand what the Crimea side of Ukraine is all about. This is information we do not have from let me just say, the African side. But again, have we been affected from the Africa with this aggression? Yes. A little backstory. Last year, 2022, we had elections in my country. Our elections are usually in August, and towards election, I think a lot of things change. The dollar rises, and that affects our economy. Our shilling weakens, especially during the election period. So we get a new government elected into office, and the prices of basic commodities like grains, maize flour, wheat flour, they skyrocket, they double, and everyone in the country cries. They blame the new government. The new government blames the previous administration that was in charge for 5 years. So after a few weeks, neighboring country Tanzania was in the same space. They were complaining, their prices were skyrocketing. People could not afford basic commodities. Sudan was on the same train, Djibouti, Nigeria, all these countries were in the same, on the same, let me just call it train. people could not afford basic commodities. And all this was because of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. There was no grain coming to Africa from Ukraine. You are our main suppliers. My country has received a lot of support, including from the Grain from Ukraine initiative. I think the last batch we received was about 25,000 tons. Tanzania has received the same. Sudan has received the same. This is a country that us from Africa so much depend on, that any little thing that affects its supply of grain affects our livelihoods as Africa. And if you, if you've noticed, 5 of the countries I've listed are from the East African region. I haven't touched on Algeria, which also depends on grain from Ukraine. There is Morocco, there is a lot of that. So we just, I'm here to understand how we can, as Africans, support Ukraine and be good friends to Ukraine at the end of all this aggression. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next, Swasti, we can go to you. Why are you here?
Is this working? Am I audible? Okay. So why am I here? I think a better question should be, why wasn't I here earlier? Okay, so first of all, thank you, Crimea Platform, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, President's Office of Ukraine, Zimna, of course, organizers for hosting this wonderful conference. And I think understanding Ukraine through the South is something which is extremely discerning. So I am really paying a lot of attention here. Thank you for the kind introduction as well. I have been working for the last 3 years at the Ministry of Defense think tank in India. I recently left, obviously because there were too many restrictions on what I could work on, where I could travel, what I could say. And of course, Ukraine war and analyzing the Ukraine war is a very important part of my work for the last 3 years. And I'm very happy to be here. And I must say that as an Indian, I felt so proud, so moved by Anurag's wonderful remarks. I think, Anurag, you are a role model, and I think the story needs to get out, to more people in India, because this is a story that we need to hear more, of course. Now, very quickly, I am also speaking at a different panel where it would be about propaganda, and that also, makes a huge part of my work about how a certain kind of a Russian propaganda is extremely popular in India, and why everything that is coming from there is taken as gospel. But I would sort of leave those remarks there. What I want to, start with here is something more specific, and I would like to build on it later, later in the second round or maybe in the question-answer session. Is, this something very historic happened a few months ago with Prime Minister's Modi visit. Okay, and I'm very happy that the representative from the Foreign Affairs Office also mentioned about Prime Minister Modi's visit, and he said that this is the first ever time that somebody from the Global South, or like a leader of the Global South, had actually visited Ukraine. Now, very quickly today, I'm going to present to you 5 important reasons why we should be talking more about not just the Russia-Ukraine war, but also about what it means for India and for the larger Global South. The first thing, of course, before I come to those 5 things which are more specific to India, yes, of course, food security is a very, very important topic that a lot of us in the Global South are interested in. In fact, I'm very happy that yesterday we had a very lengthy, comprehensive discussion with the Seaports Authority representatives and the naval, Ukrainian naval officers about how the Ukrainian corridor has been actually doing much better than the UN-Turkey mediated corridor, and I think that is a very important point to highlight. So that's one thing. I'm sure there is so much discussion on that. I just don't want to go on repeating what is obvious, but for now, with respect to India and why am I here and why I think this conversation needs to also get to you, is that what happened with Prime Minister Modi's visit was that now we see a kind of a foreign policy of de-hyphenation, which is that India, for the longest time, looked at the Russia-Ukraine war from the lens of the bilateral ties of India-Russia relations, which of course are historic and friendly and all that. And because of that, I think there was a very rudimentary understanding of why really is this war happening, where is this war going, and what does it mean, for the global society. But with Prime Minister Modi coming here, I think that dehyphenation, which was there in my analysis in the background already, and for reasons I'll tell you in a while, also came to the foreground, and then you started seeing that there was much more, I would say, healthier discussion, even if I wouldn't say very informed, but healthier discussion about why the war is happening, why Ukraine is important. And this dehyphenation, of course, please remember, is a work in progress. So this is not something where we have arrived, but I would say that we have started. But it really opens up a space for a more meaningful dialogue and for a more meaningful role for India to play eventually whenever the war ends. The second thing is about India's own national interest, which not many people realize. Often there is a tendency to think of the war in Ukraine, and in India, we are thinking about it from a relatively higher pedestal that, okay, maybe the Ukrainians need our support, maybe the Ukrainians need our mediation. But what a lot of people do not realize, not in Ukraine as well, and in India and the rest of the world, is that there are specific national interests that is actually driving India's interest and should drive India's interest in Ukraine. And the first thing out there is the technical military cooperation that goes back decades. In fact, I have been working in the military establishment, and I can tell you for sure that the entire frontline fleet of India's warships has the gas turbine engines from Ukraine. And the entire, fleet of India's aircraft, which are not very modern, which belong particularly to the Soviet era, all of them have Ukrainian gas turbine engines. So much so that the latest, deal that we struck for stealth frigates with Russia in 2016, perhaps, which were supposed to be 4 of those boats. 2 of them were supposed to be made in St. Petersburg, in Kaliningrad, and 2 of those were supposed to be made in India. All 4 have Ukrainian gas turbine engines, and because Ukraine-Russia had a complete breakdown of ties, you know what India did? Everybody here would know about the oil rerouting, but you don't know about the gas turbine engine rerouting, which is that we first got it from Ukraine and we sent it to Russia so that Russia can make the ships and then send it back to India. So what I'm trying to say is that while India-Russia relationship is hyped, of course it goes back a long deal, but what is not usually mentioned, a lot of times by also analysts and scholars and military historians, is this kind of dependence that India has on Ukraine, which is absolutely about India's national interest. It is not about whether India can play a good role, bad role, all of that can come later. This is about hardcore national interest, and the kind of dependence we have today is going to tie us to the gas turbine engines and a lot of other things that I'll tell you in a while for the next at least 1.5 decades. So this is something important I wanted to highlight. The other thing is that not many people also understand that Bharat Forge, which is a very important, defense sector unit in India, actually acquired 51% stakes in the Indian arm of the Ukrainian firm Zorya. I'm sure everybody here, probably you know about Zorya. And these kind of things actually tell you the longevity and the strength that the technical military cooperation that Indian defense firms have with Ukraine, something which is always somehow relegated in the in the background. I can of course talk more about it. I don't want to bore you with all these names, but coming to the third point, I think there needs to be a better understanding of India's reconstruction efforts, because while the political rhetoric in India is a lot about multi-alignment and how multi-alignment is a tool with which India sort of expresses its strategic autonomy. And I think there's a lot of fair amount of attention paid to that. But where I would like to have more attention, not only from the Ukrainians, but also from Europeans, because many a times when I'm speaking in Europe or elsewhere, when our foreign minister speaks, he's only asked this one question of why is India not criticizing Russia. Whereas I feel that a more constructive question should be about what really have been India's reconstruction efforts and how can these be built upon. So for example, India has not really been a passive bystander in the war. You know, India has consistently been a part of all the 4 peace summits, starting from Copenhagen, then Jeddah. Of course, the one in Jeddah, which was put together by Saudi Arabia, was attended by our national security advisor, and that has been the most, I would say, prominent Indian participation. After that, there was a 3rd one at Malta, and the 4th one at Switzerland, where, of course, the joint communique was not signed. So very quickly, what I'm saying is that I think we need to perhaps talk a little bit more about this and the working groups which were made in those peace summits and what role can India play. Because we also had a previous meeting on the 18th of November, I think 2 days ago, where Tamila was present, of course, and the Ukrainian side was having a lot of hope from how India can play a constructive role, and I think that's important. Now, for the record, another important thing, that India has already sent about 17 consignments of humanitarian aid, 10 generator sets, and several consignments of what we call as the medical capsules Bhishma. Now, of course, I understand this is not enough, but what I want to say is that this is where we need to perhaps expand more diplomatic traction. And she's signaling me to end, so
Yeah,
very
I'm
quickly.
sorry, I have to be a good moderator.
Yes,
I
of course.
I need to ask you to
So
wrap it up.
basically, if I may be just allow 30 seconds, if you put all these things together, you understand that even a country like India that takes so much pride in being multi-aligned and neutral, you would see that is ready for innovative solutions. And finally, all of this is about, a renewed engagement. I think that there is a lot of space for that renewed engagement. People like Anurag are very apt for it, myself, and then, there's another Indian participant, and we need to really work on that. And looking forward to the second round. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Swaste. Thank you. I think it was more than we counted on. You just gave us a primer on everything related to India, Ukraine, and Russia. Now we can go to our online participant, Dr. Dina. Can you hear us still? We're ready for your opening statement.
Yes, I can hear you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Well, dear organizer, my dear moderator and fellow panelists, good afternoon and good evening from Jakarta, Indonesia. Indonesia is a country 9,000 kilometers away from Ukraine, a country of 280 million people. It's the world's largest archipelago that is located in Southeast Asia. So my apology, I cannot be with you in Kiev because of technical timing of visa issuance. So I'm glad that the organizer is very kind to facilitate this online opportunity. So a bit about myself before I answer why I'm here. I'm an advisor on diplomacy and public policies, an associate professor in international relations, who is also an activist. I write, I train diplomats and also government officials. And I was appointed negotiator for human rights issue by the government of Indonesia for ASEAN back in 2016 to 2018. And I've been involved in various tracks of diplomatic negotiations in Indonesia. So I've been leading this independent think tank called Synergy Policies for 10 years now. So if I ask why I'm here, it's because I care. Because Indonesia also care about Ukraine and wish for Crimea to be part of Ukraine. And I also wish for the war of Ukraine with Russia to end soon. We share the same world, the same geopolitics, thus the risk of aggression, imperialism, unilateralism leaves us a fragile earth. I know how difficult it is, how difficult negotiations can be. So I must hear directly from you, what do you see that I don't see, that I can help with? The 1,000 Days War is a painful reminder of why we should prevent our generations from experiencing the scourge of wars. I also see how dangerous it is for a neighbor to a country that is very hard to negotiate with and who is willing to advance war against you. I watch events unfolding in Ukraine, and my take of this war is at least threefold. The first one is that the use of military and arms is very, very devastating to a nation state, particularly the civilians. Not just the casualties, but also the destruction of infrastructure, roads, houses, facilities, the opportunities to study, the disruption to the economy, livelihood, and it will take years to rebuild. So it is our responsibility to start now, enhancing our solidarity with the Global South so that we can stop this war and help Ukraine. The second observation is that in this interdependent world, a war in one side of the world brings ramifications to other parts of the world. Grain supply is one example. Another thing, we have the issue of fertilizers, energy, transportation, logistics, flights, and so on. So as much as possible, we should do a parallel effort of diplomacy to complement what military approach can do. My third observation is that please know, my fellow Ukrainians, that Indonesia, both the government and the civil society, is available to facilitate the creation of conducive environment for peace talks. You know, our former President Joko Widodo met President Zelensky just days after the war started in 2021. And Indonesia sent humanitarian aid, not once, but 3 times already, in March 2015, June 2022, and May 2023. It comprises of medicine and also efforts to reconstruct hospitals across Ukraine. We are in coordination with the Ukrainian Ministry of Health. Indonesia's newly inaugurated president, President Prabowo, also presses through forums. He just went to G20 meeting and he demanded immediate ceasefire in Ukraine and in Gaza included in the G20 summit. So as a closing for this first round, I would like to say that peace is fragile, it is very sensitive, it is something that we must fight for. So let's work together, starting with this networking of countries and experts who care about Ukraine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dina. Thank you for such a beautiful statement. And now finally, we are ready to give an opportunity to our Ukraine participants. Shall we start with Andrei?
Yeah, of course, surely.
We're starting with you.
Good afternoon, dear friends, colleagues. A great pleasure and honor to be here and to use this opportunity to share with you some thoughts and the ideas about the national security issues, Crimean issue, and also to say thank again for our friends from so-called Global South. I don't like this term, because you know, Global South is a very it's a major states of the world with a different culture, different traditions, different views on politics. And what we need first, that is dialogue. Dialogue, but very, very precise dialogue, very oriented on interests dialogue. And it's really good, it's really great thing that we are here together. Because when we are talking about the national security, we cannot but mention regional and also global security. The name of our conference is very symbolic for me, Crimea Global, because from one hand, it's about one of the Ukrainian regions, Crimea, but from other, it's a global issue, because annexation, occupation of Crimea by Russian Federation influenced greatly the global security and continue to influence. And we should concentrate on that, also global consequences of that act of aggression. So dialogue, and trust as a result of that dialogue. And one more, but we should realize one more issue, very important issue, that Russia is quite active in influencing people in countries of Africa, Asia, Latin America. They are talking about just peace, and they are talking about Russia as the defender of traditional values. But what we have in reality, they just talk about the new division of the world under the great powers, with no interest of small or medium states to be observed or to be respected. So, new neo-colonial state, it's not about the European or any other Western countries. It's first of all about Russians, about Russia. And we should realize this fact and realize Russia's activity in all these regions, Russia's attempt to influence minds of people. And the issue of cognitive resilience is absolutely important for all of us. And from that point, due to lessons learned by Ukraine, we could share our experience. And that's also the part of our dialogue. So many things we have in common. So let's talk and let's have a platform for further cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrei. Thank you. I really liked one of the points you made, but I will follow up on this for the second round of questions. And now we can go to Daria for her opening statement.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you, everybody, dear all colleagues, partners, journalists. I'm very honored and humbled to speak here today before all of you. And I want to start with one remarkable quote. It goes like this. Dear friends, I brought you peace, peace with honor. And I believe this is the peace for our time. So go home and have a quiet and nice sleep. Sounds amazing, isn't it? But the thing is that this speech, the quote from the very long-awaited speech, became the biggest illusion of its time. It was delivered by Neville Chamberlain on September 30 in 1938. And just a year after, the Nazi troops marched through the central Warsaw. What happened next? You all know the story. The thing is, the Russian aggression against Ukraine mirrors this history remarkably and in a very interesting way. The refusal of aggressor to call the war a war. The narratives of endless, eternal, I would say, ceasefires. We all, I was a little bit involved into the Minsk process. For that time, I was doing only technical support, not very much involved, but I know that each ceasefire, it always was a lie. And it's not even necessary to be involved into the Minsk process. All Ukrainians know that each ceasefire with Russia was a big Russian lie. Going next. The aggressor demands aiming on destroying the essentials, the foundations of our state and national identity. And I think that it's also necessary to say that during only the lifetime of one generation, all the Eastern Europe lost its independence because of Soviet regime and its further domination. And at the same time, the countries out of West, dozens of countries, gained theirs. And this is why we really respect the right of these countries for neutrality, because we understand how complicated and long and really, really very long was their journey. But at the same time, it's necessary to understand that the Russian aggression against Ukraine, it's a completely different thing. First of all, for Russia, it's not the clash of empires. It's not the proxy war. For Russia, it's a colonial war. And for Ukraine, this is the war for independence and survival. And it's also, we need to admit that this war already went far beyond our borders. You already talk about food security, nuclear security, global logistics, I think that also ecology issues, I would say even environmental devastation. And each dollar which will be spent for recovery could be spent for fighting climate change. I think that it's obvious that there can be no hand sitting in this war. But it's also necessary to understand that in all the peace plans, foreign peace plans, which we heard about, they don't really give the secure peace. They can't guarantee that peace, and they don't really address real Russia's motives. Let's be clear about Putin's goal. Only about merely grabbing the territories. It's about destroying our national identity. It's about Putin Russification all over the territory of Ukraine. And we see these practices in Crimea, in other temporarily occupied territories, in the Donbas region. So I would say that this is why I think personally that the peace formula of President Zelensky suggests not only the decisions how this war could be ended, but also how another war, which we fully understand can happen very soon, to prevent it, yes. It also gives an opportunity to all the countries in the world to unite, to show a global leadership for the non-Western countries. I don't like this term in Global South. I would think that I would prefer to name it non-Western countries. I think that this is an opportunity to lead, to perform, to pioneer the global reforms. We all understand, I guess, that we all need the reform of United Nations. We need the expanding the Security Council of United Nations. And peace formula gives this opportunity. We just need to understand that the peace will not come through ceasefires. We've been there, we've seen it multiple times. It can come only on full deterrence of Russia and restoring Ukrainian territorial integrity, returning Crimea. It's also, you know, I always say this, it's very important when you look at some politician to understand where he comes from, what's his background. And Putin is a guy who came from KGB. What are the key, what is the psychological portrait of a typical KGB guy? First of all, they never say the truth. Because once you say, here's the lie and here's the truth, it will be easy to compare. And it will be obvious that you've lied here. So this is why you always lie. Second, he always blackmailing this nuclear weapons, all the stuff, but also every time I remind everyone the story with Finland, for example. You remember that it was a big and very scary Russian long text when Finland was not the member of NATO. But as soon as they became member of NATO, it was not the issue anymore. Silence, and nothing happened. Nothing bad happened then. And I think that the third thing is he understands only the language of power, of strength. When you show him this strength, he will not move further. I see Olga's...
Oh, no.
So I'm finishing.
I just have a very lively face. You can continue.
So, in general, I think that I would like to say that the most crowded and the most popular points in peace formula were nuclear security, food security, and humanitarian dimension of war. And this is not only Ukraine's priorities, this is global problems. And if we will solve these issues which were created by Putin's invasion, then we will all win. And this win-win principle is the basis of President Zelensky's formula. So I really hope that we all understand this. Russians really like to use the phrase the multilateral world. But we really need to understand what do they hide under this beautiful phrase and to clear the real concept of it. In this vision of multilateral world, there is no place for other countries which they call as a global majority which will champion. The Russians use this concept only as a tool for their imperial ambitions. And non-Western countries should not give the Russians the opportunity to manipulate with this idea or concept, whatever. I really hope that through unity and understanding of all of this, we together will create the world where the phrase peace with honor will not become another prologue for another tragedy and catastrophe. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Daria. So it's a beautiful and passionate speech, and I will actually use it and bounce off it for the second round of questions. This question is for our international participants. As I was listening to Daria's speech, I was thinking, these are the exact right words. I know them by heart, I've said them myself. I'm mostly talking to Western audiences. Most of the readers of the Kyiv Independent come from the West. The places I travel to speak about Ukraine and the war are mostly in Europe and in the US. And this is also the words that I use when I talk to them. I evoke the World War II reference, as Daria did. And I always feel like this is a very good, strong message. These are the right words to say. But I'm also thinking now, are we doing, as Ukraine, are we doing the best possible job of tailoring this message to non-Western countries? Because as you said, I also don't like the Global South term because by using it, we are kind of undermining our effort of the outreach, because we are throwing so many different cultures and communities under the same umbrella. And I think Russia understands this pretty well. I think Russia does a good job of tailoring the message. And the interesting paradox there is that I think that Russia does a good job there because of its imperial past. Because it used to be an empire that tells people what to think and how to think. And if you remember, Andriy, when in his opening speech was saying dialogue, let's talk, let's understand each other. An empire doesn't want to understand, an empire wants to tell you how to think. And they used from the centuries of experience, they're used to doing it well. And then the paradox of it is that the rhetoric that Russia uses and the pre-existing perceptions that Russia uses are often in non-Western countries, they are about colonialism. So, for example, in South America, they are benefiting from the pre-existing, view of the United States as a colonial oppressor, and Russia is benefiting from that even though it is itself a colonial oppressor. So it is using it pretty masterfully, unfortunately for us. And the question to international participants is, you all heard Daria's speech. This is Ukraine's message to the world on how to achieve peace. How can we tailor it best to really reach the people in your countries? And I'm not talking just about the governments, I'm talking about the people. What in Ukraine's message to reach the people in your country, what stands out? What is the strongest point? What is missing? What can we make, even stronger? What can we emphasize? And this is not to any specific participants, it's to all of you, so whoever wants to go first. But I will have to ask you to be brief. I will time you because we want to leave some time for the questions from the audience. So who can go first? You can start. You want to go in the same order? All right. You're people of habit. Uriah?
Okay, so what's missing, I think, it comes to what I said earlier. I think there's this approach, and I understand that Ukraine sees what Russia is doing as colonialism. And because most of the African and Latin American countries were colonized, it might seem that there might be some identification between those different regions, but I think there might be other approaches. If Ukraine, of course, is not going to use the same tactics that Russia uses as dividing or intervening with foreign elections, for example, then you need to find something more positive. And then there's something that Daria said, for example, for the case of Brazil. You said something about reforming the multilateral institutions. It's something that the Brazilian president stands for. He really talks about reforming the United Nations Security Council. So why can't Brazil and Ukraine find this common ground together around this single topic and then build something from there? And since Global South is not something unique as in unity, it has different qualities. I think the thing that is missing might be identifying specific common ground with every different region and then work from there. I don't think there's a recipe of what's missing that could work for every single country.
And it's a mistake we often make, I think, in our minds, thinking that there is a common recipe for winning the Global South. Yeah. Brian?
Yeah. So far, I think Ukraine has been doing a good job. For Africa specifically, when I was here in November last year, Ukraine had, I think, 11 operational embassies and missions in Africa. As of July this year, I think they have increased. They are about 20 at the moment. What is lacking, I think, for Africa, it's the message. What is Ukraine about? What is Ukraine fighting about? When I was here last year, I got to share pictures I took around Kyiv and Odessa, and the first question I got from my friends and family was, we hear this country is at war, but what we are seeing from your pictures are very beautiful buildings, people going about their normal businesses. So the message needs to get home, because that is the advantage Russia has. Its message is propaganda, a lot of it. 50% of it is propaganda. Ukraine does not want to counter the propaganda, because it will look like it's countering the propaganda. But if you ask me, I think there is need to counter that propaganda that is spread across Africa. Yes.
What would you say is the biggest, the most successful message of Russian propaganda that is spreading in Africa?
Russia is winning this war. That is the biggest propaganda they have. You can't convince anyone. I have friends who tell me Ukraine should just concede. Yeah? Ukraine should give Russia what it wants to end this war. Otherwise, Ukraine is getting destroyed. When you look at the recent US elections, most people believe Putin is for Russia. Trump is for Russia. So you talk to a lot of people on the ground, they'll tell you that Ukraine is going to lose. But Ukraine, look at the size of Ukraine and Russia. You've sustained yourselves for 3 whole years. Population-wise, Russia is big. Ukraine is a small country, but you've been resilient in this war. And yeah, we wait and see.
It is perhaps one of the most powerful messages of Russian propaganda around the world. They have managed to convince many people that this war is unwinnable for Ukraine, which it isn't. Thank you, Brian. Swasti, now to you.
Yes, so I think I would just simplify it in 2 parts. One is the ideational aspect of course, the value of freedom, of course. And we in India, of course, we have had 200 years of colonial past. So practically we should be actually siding with Ukraine because we should understand what is going on. And the reason why that is not happening is because the Russian propaganda is very, very strong. And I completely agree. The narrative is that Russia is winning the war. It is impossible to defeat Russia on its home turf, as if Ukraine is Russia's home turf. Also other things like Russian economy is doing very well, the sanctions have failed, the West is not united because West is a democratic society and you hear all kinds of opinion, versus in Russia you actually do not really have an opinion. In fact, you cannot even call it a war. One very quick thing that I'd like to say about narratives is that when I come to Ukraine to study the war, people ask me, oh, why are you so tilted in the favor of Ukraine? You've already taken sides. I said, no, as a scholar, my point is to authenticate whatever research I'm doing. And in Russia, you cannot even call it a war, let alone do any analysis or any research on it, okay? That's why the entire world has to flock to Ukraine to understand what is happening. So that's one part. Ideationally, of course, I believe that you have to counter. Do you do it alone? Do you do it along with Western partners? Of course, I do see Ukraine doing a lot. In fact, in the last 2 years, there have been 2 deputy prime ministers visit, Ukrainian deputy prime ministers visit to India, including foreign ministers. When Dmytro Kuleba was a foreign minister, he too had visited. And frankly, I believe President Zelensky coming to India should also follow, honestly. On the other side is the more practical aspect, which is about all the values and all the talk comes later. I think what really drives nations is their national interest. And I really think there is a lot of work and a lot of ground to be covered to convince the countries of what you refer to as Global South, is that it is truly in their national interest to understand how the war has also impacted Russia. A small example, very important example, you know that India's defense industry for many decades has been dependent on Russia. More than 70 to 75% of our weapons used to come from Russia. After the war in Ukraine has begun, India has not placed a single new order with Russia. Why? Because of the way Ukrainian have been fighting, because of the way we are also seeing the performance of the Russian weapon. So what I'm trying to say is that these are kind of things at a very practical level that you have to convince the countries of the non-Western world that ultimately it is not in your favor to really side with regimes that are very autocratic and that are capable of perpetrating this kind of violence on people that they call their cousins.
Thank you so much for this question. And now we can go to Dina, to you. How can Ukraine tailor its message better for Indonesia to increase the support in your country? We can't hear you currently. Що у нас зі звуком?
So do let us know if we are online.
Thank you. Now I can, because I cannot unmute myself. Thank you so much. That's an important question, actually. I listened carefully to what our fellow from Ukraine feels so passionate about and feels so emotional about the situation in Ukraine. But one thing you have to realize, in the among the emerging economies, we started off as countries that are very poor, very much also colonialized, and experiencing hundred years of being oppressed, killed, genocide, and things like that. We also experience it, including in Indonesia. But one thing that I think most countries in Southeast Asia also cannot quite relate with Ukraine is that here in Asia we have a more logic of being independent in foreign affairs. We appreciate neighbors, we understand the importance of distance, and also try not to lend our sovereignty by aligning with powers of other countries. So it's a very serious question in our in our talks most of the time about if you don't want to be, connected to, mentioned as one part of Western powers, whom, by the way, in many different occasions also show unilateralism force, aggression against people in Gaza, in Myanmar. We also see how very ignorant, big powers in the UN to our part of the region. The question really is, why can't Ukraine also think about trying to secure peace by being independent? So the question about joining the NATO as non-negotiable is still a big question also to us in Southeast Asia. In Asia, we try not to do something like that because it's very risky. We try to not put one defense cooperation under one basket, because it's going to be destabilizing, not just for our country, but also for the region as a whole. So the independence of thinking is one thing. The second issue that I would like to raise here is that for us, it's not just about Ukraine. We don't see just Ukraine and Russia in the whole narrative about what's going on. We also see NATO, we also see the US. And we watch how in the latest moments before Joe Biden left office, he did so many shocking things to increase the tension in Ukraine and Russia. To us, that's really puzzling. For us who are keep talking about, stabilizing things through dialogue, through G20. Indonesia was a president during the break of the war in Ukraine. And we worked very hard to make sure everybody still wants to communicate with each other. So this is so devastating to see this, progress or lack of progress, right? So I think we cannot ignore the reality that the world sees in a more holistic picture. So I would like to hear some more, of course, from the Ukraine side. But that's how the Asian side, the Indonesian side see things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. I could keep asking you questions, but let's give Dina an applause. Dina was supposed to be here with us, but she ran into visa complications, but we hope she'll make it here next year, maybe. I could keep asking you questions, but I don't want to abuse my role as a moderator and hoard you, so I want to give the opportunity to the audience. Do we have a microphone in the, yes? So the first hand was over there, and please identify yourself and identify who at the panel you're addressing the question.
Thank you so much. Oh, my voice is always too loud. My name is Yar and I represent Freedom House, that's the American organization, and my question is basically to all of the foreign representatives here. In my work, I'm responsible mostly for Eurasia, which is like Europe and Asia without Asia, like Russia and Eastern Partnership and countries like this. And I rarely have opportunity to work and talk to people from your regions, from your countries. And the question I have is kind of tricky for me, but I'm trying to digest it for quite some time now. The question is about population, work, and business and economy of our countries. When I was born in closer to the end of Soviet Union, population of Ukraine was roughly 60 million people. Now, according to UN, we do not have our counting, but now our population is roughly 30 million people. If you go into details, and I can give an example of Kenya, Ukraine is bigger than Kenya, but has twice less people now. And an obvious question of survival of my country, because I live here in Ukraine, even though working globally or worldwide, the question of survival is population and economy. Do you have discussions within your countries, your regions, about possibility to work in Ukraine, about possibility for people to come to Ukraine and work with us after the war, obviously, not now, but that's something I try to digest and something I try to understand from the position of people from your region, if that's possible, if that's the possibility for you. Thank you.
Yeah, on a personal capacity, I have had such conversations with officials of the Kenyan embassy. On the larger scale, I'm not privy to discussions the embassy has with other people they meet and government officials. So I don't know if they have had such conversations. But yeah, that would be an interesting discussion to take up from now, going forward, when I go back to Kenya. Thank you.
I think that answers it. Thank you. We have a hand over there.
Thank you. My name is Suleiman Mahmutov, and I'm the member of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. My question is the following. So, Russian political leadership repeated many times that it is ready for the start of the peace negotiations, but at the same time they outlined the conditions that are non-starter for Ukraine and its society. For Ukrainian society, these conditions, I mean, Russian peace means the expansion of Ruski Mir, or Russian world. And I understand that the more the distance, the less the empathy for these concerns. And my question is, what do you see, how do you see the better avenues in your country, for your society? What is the best message that can be crafted to ensure, or to back up the legitimacy of of the concerns expressed by Ukrainian society, and to show that this is not just an unwillingness, but this is something that is about the existential threat. And in your view, what is who can be the best messenger to convey this message? Thank you.
If I may be allowed to just take that question, because I wanted to answer a little bit more and I couldn't, which is that, listen, India in that sense understands the legality of the issue very well, because on our own borders, we suffer from an expansionist China. And in fact, if you look at the dynamics of Asia and larger Indo-Pacific, China says it wants a multipolar world, but a unipolar Asia. So in many ways, it's like Russia wanting a multipolar, Eurasia, but actually Europe or East Asia, whatever. I mean, basically it wants a Russia-led, East Europe. So in that sense, what I'm saying is that India completely understands the legality of it. But what comes in the way of India taking, for example, a country like India that takes 1.4 billion people, going to be third largest economy, such a pivotal position in Indo-Pacific. I mean, I can't overstate the importance of India today, right? But even then, it is not able to play a more constructive role because, yes, there are genuine issues with respect to narrative, and you have to address it at the end of the day because the narrative, like I said, is very strong. And but don't be under the impression that in India we do not study, for example, whether Russia wins this particular 18 or 20% of Ukrainian land or loses it, it's a different thing. The very fact that this war, which was supposed to last 3 or 5 days, has gone on for more than 3 years, okay, and probably is going to go on longer, shows that Russia is going to get pushed with China, which has security implications for India. So what I'm saying is that as far as messaging is concerned, yes, you have to really tackle at the heart of this issue, which remains a propaganda issue. And ultimately, everything else kind of falls in place and adjusts.
And on the issue of who would be the best messenger to convey the message of Ukraine, that was the second part. The second part of the question was, who would be the best messenger?
Oh, that probably the Ukrainians can.
No, this is for you to...
Well, yes. So, of course, I think what it should come from, I think people-centric stories are very important. The government would always have restrictions. For example, the government, like I said, that we still are a multi-aligned country, and we think that multi-alignment and the consequential hedging, right, is perhaps the best suited foreign policy option in a very uncertain world. And I frankly think that there is a lot of logic there, which is that, yes, the world is uncertain and we should be hedging our bets. But having said that, the government is one part. The other part, I think more people-centric, stories like, for example, the medical students. By the way, Anurag, you should know, when the war in Ukraine began, the Ministry of Defense issued an advisory for Indian students stranded in Ukraine, and I was a part of that. So, and my interest began there, and it has continued for 3 years. So that part about showing how Ukraine can become a gateway for other developing countries whenever reconstruction opportunities are good, because Ukraine can become a strategic gateway for a lot of Indians. And that is one part that I'm also discussing with a lot of, shippers in Odessa, for example, who have been trying to put together Indians to come and invest more, because frankly, the Americans are doing it, the British are doing it, the Europeans are doing it, but perhaps Indians are missing the bus. So I think those kind of people-centric things, which are more about betterment, economic betterment, students, people-to-people ties, civil society, scholarly ties, I think they have a very, very huge role to play there.
Thank you, Swasti. Uriya, do you want to go next?
Yes, just answer that. I think the best people that could do that is all of us in this room, especially the people that are organizing this and are making this possible. For me, for example, I've been working as a political analyst for 3 years now, and I get to write to some of the most important newspapers in Brazil. I've been talking about what's going on here from my perspective, but from the first time that I'm given the opportunity to be here, it will legitimize me to go back with a stronger message. So this work, I think this is the most important thing, and it's already been done.
Thank you. Dina, perhaps you want to answer this question about the best message, also the best possible messenger?
Yeah. So there's a big question at this point. How should we classify or cluster the world? Who are in which pole? This is a serious question because the West has been trying to identify basically who is with who and where are they heading. And this is not happening within a night. We know it's been happening for years and in several phases. And one of the big question here is that the regime of sanction has been used so very often against any country, let me say, any country who is beyond the scenario of what is seen as a single recipe for how to be a good nation state in the world during this era of certain hegemony, I should say. So when the rise of many emerging economies is becoming more and more visible, what I see, I've been in this business of international relations for almost 30 years now. So it's very concerning for me to see even Indonesia, a country that has been very much pledged into being independent and being free in making decisions. We are never under any influence of any other country, still being suspected as being not neutral. So it's very much a concerning development in my view, because where is the principle of the United Nations Charter that we all have believed in, that gathered us together around the room in Geneva, in New York? So communicating with emerging countries require us to see us as who we are. We are so diverse. We come from various different struggles. Not just, we cannot just talk about the economy, because the economy nowadays has been dividing us more than uniting us. As I said, the rise of our economies have been seen as something distrustful, as something threatening, instead of something that's, we thought in the year of 2000 as something positive that everybody should strive for. So we should ponder in the point that was raised earlier, let's reform the United Nations. Okay, Indonesia is also in that position. Let's reform the United Nations. In fact, here at home, we are discussing what is the best formula we can advance. But one thing for sure, we have to make sure there's no veto anymore in the United Nations Security Council. But the question is, who should be there and how decisions should be made? The question is also, should we expel the countries who has been trying to use unilateralism over and over and over? We have seen various kinds of violations, but yet we close our eyes simply because they are majority countries, major countries with very mighty weapons. So I guess we should change our path and start thinking, if we want to be different from what we've seen today, let's not approach other countries using weapons too. It's hard, it's very tough, but in the past, Indonesia did this back in 1955 with no weapons. We were no rich country at that time. In Bandung Declaration, we united 55 countries because we see patterns of similarities of our struggle at that time against certain power, certain kinds of power. So I think it's a very good start. We have this moment. I'm available. Many experts in Indonesia are eager to speak some more about these patterns of similarities across the world that we can all contribute positively to create a world that's different, that's not like now, just thinking about power.
Thank you, Dina. Andrei and Daria, is there perhaps anything that you heard that you want to react to? Because I'm trying, of course, to get the maximum out of the presence of our foreign guests and give them the most floor. But if you want to react to anything that you heard, there were many suggestions made.
Just a very short follow-up or reflection on the narrative topic, Russian narratives. I think that we live in hybrid times, so we need hybrid decisions. So, and the best answer on Russian narratives spread in your countries, in your regions, would be not only the direct answer, but also the answer by presence of Ukraine grain, and in general Ukraine business in your countries, by Ukraine education, and my best appreciation for people, for students, national students who are now in Ukraine, nevertheless of all circumstances and conditions, and we should enlarge this process. And also, the answer is again and again. I will return to that in the dialogue on diplomatic level, because we know about all the peace initiatives from African leaders, some ideas from Brazil, but they are very appreciated by Ukraine. But we should work on them because. They are not so ideal.
I agree.
So again, we have a very good platform to do a very good answer on Russian propaganda or any other propaganda, because Russia is maybe the most active in that, but not the only one, and we should do that together. Thank you.
I think we're about to. Thank you, Andrei. I think we're about to have to wrap this up. So, Daria, any final words of wisdom?
Yeah, I fully agree with the previous speaker, first of all. Second, I'm really impressed and so touched with the words I've heard today from our guests. I've been really surprised by hearing about grain from Ukraine, because, I was thinking that I was not satisfied with the temps of our work, and I was thinking that it's not enough and we're not moving with such a speed we aim to. And it's so great to listen about the results of your work and to know that it works. I fully agree with you about there is one interesting thing. Recently, one person told me, keep saying that you are fighting fighting on disinformation. And this is not correct, because as soon as you start fighting disinformation, it means that you play on the field of the enemy. And the win in the information war is not a clash, but domination and creation of your own narratives. And everything which you just suggested and everything which you just outlined, it's absolutely right. So what I think, this is a beginning, like in Casablanca, it's the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I really hope that this dialogue will continue. And I also wanted to say one of my favorite projects which I'm capable of, it's the Bring Kids Back UA. It's a platform project which connects and unites the efforts of both state, international partners and civil society, and this is very important. Civil society plays a major role in this project. And we started to work with non-Western countries on that, and we realized that civil society in media is the key, is the bridge, and we found so many people who care. I now have so many not friends, but I think friends in future from India, from South Africa, from Brazil. And frankly speaking, I feel very, very much impressed, and I have this feeling that we are not alone, that we are surrounded by friends. We just need to keep going. Like, if you're going through hell, keep going. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think this is a beautiful end to the panel. Also, Daria just quoted from my all-time favorite movie, Casablanca, so I'm personally very touched by that. I think we need to thank our guests, especially the guests who made it to Ukraine. You know, if you are a Ukrainian speaker at a conference anywhere abroad now, you get always a big round of applause for the fact that you made it there, because they appreciate that you made the long trip without air travel, you know, with all the trains. And I think our guests today deserve the loudest possible applause, because they made the same trip from very far, and they made it to be here with us and to understand us better and to bring that knowledge to their countries. So huge round of applause for our participants. Thank you.